Hello, welcome to today's episode of Firefighting Fridays. I'm Jeff Diederich with Strategic Fire Training. And today we have Jeff Shupe, Jerry Knapp, John Mateer, Micah, Hydeman, and Chad Gruver to round it out tonight. We're going to go over command and control at the scene of a fire, engine company's role. We'll get into some truck and rescue companies as well, and how to keep track of those guys as we move through the incident. And of course, a lot of this stuff is experience-based versus textbook based, especially some of the newer stuff. We're more of a practical knowledge, hands-on type group here. So we're going to share with you some of our experience and maybe help you understand a little bit more of command and control from our perspective. And hopefully you can take away and use some of that. Jeff, let's get started, huh?
Okay.
Let's
everybody hear me okay?
Yeah,
Can
we
you hear me
got
now?
you. So
Okay.
we're gonna start with talking about larger incidents, or we're gonna start with our bread and butter stuff. Where do you want to go?
Well, we might as well start with the bread and butter, just to break the ice.
Okay.
And then we'll go up to the larger incidents, the multiple company operations and things like that. So,
All
right, good. So I guess it's and again, we'll stick with our, what do you call it? Our standard presentation, boilerplate and things like that. But the other thing is we'll be talking mostly about 3 people on an engine. So if you're talking about bread and butter operation, let's talk about, 1 or 2 family structures, maybe apartment houses, like a 6-unit house, or 6-unit apartment house or something like that, where you have a fire in a bedroom or a couple of rooms. And the first engine gets on the scene and you've got 3 people on it, and you've called in a working fire. Let's just say the fire's, obvious where it's at. Let's say it's a side-by-side 2-story frame structure, and you got a smoke condition, probably medium in intensity, maybe growing from the 2nd floor area where the fire is located upstairs. It's one of those things where, the most important thing, you got an obvious fire, you've located, it's upstairs and so forth. And, you got to get that line stretched. So we talk about engines where you keep your hose load simple, because if you only have 3 people, don't put a complicated hose load on there. But the line needs to be gotten in position, and the position of the engine company officer really should be behind the nozzle. And John, I know you can remember a fire back on, what was it, East 67th Street. You were the nozzle and Scott was behind you, and conditions were rotten and lousy when coming down the stairs at you. And that's the thing about, in that position as officer, you got to watch out for this stuff and watch out for your nozzle and so forth. And then, of course, you might have to tell the nozzle man, if you're the officer or acting officer in this case, or the senior firefighter, that, it's time, hey, start working this thing, from that position, and
Yeah, I think that's the first step. I think for command and control is just being accountable to your company.
right.
And
Yeah,
if you're that senior guy or the officer behind that younger person on the nozzle, is don't let them get in too far too fast, and make sure they're putting the fire out as you go. Very basics, but that's the start of accountability.
right. Yeah, in fact, it's very simple. 1 person on the nozzle, officer behind the nozzle, pump operator. That's it initially. It just doesn't get any more simple than that and more basic than that also. So, yeah. So,
All right, so moving
forward.
through the incident, especially in maybe the smaller departments that are dealing with 1 or 2 companies, and then mutual aid is filling out the rest. Typically, you don't have a chief officer showing up on a fire like that, at least initially. Most of the time they're showing up maybe even during overhaul or even later. So at some point, somebody has to take control in a formal sense. When does that happen at a bread and butter in that scenario?
Well, I think, I don't think. I remember when we first started learning ICS, and this is late 80s, early 90s, when it came out to the fire service after it had been developed, through the National Fire Academy and then through USFA. And that was your company officer is the incident commander until relieved, by a higher ranking officer upon arrival. And there's two ways to assume command, either a combative role or a commanding role. So I don't know if we've forgotten about that, or that's been thrown out the window and so forth, or people have cowed down to this thing about, well, he should be in the cab, on the radio. If you have three people on an engine, this is the stupidity of this thing. If you have three people on an engine, you got a working fire in a joint, and you're expecting your company officer to be in the cab and start passing out radio assignments to who? You're letting that person on the nozzle go in there by themselves? You're supposed to be in there with them. You can still be the incident commander. And that was a thing that was always up for debate, about, well, as other units come on the scene, well, that's what you got radios for, And if you have, let's say a lieutenant on that first arriving engine, okay? So he and the person on the nozzle are up the stairways. Now they're starting to throw water, and here comes another engine or a squad company, a ladder company, I don't care what kind of apparatus it is. And there's an officer on that unit. Well, okay, that person, you can pass it. Let that person coordinate what's going on after that. So you're satisfying a couple of things. You have some officer or you have an officer on the inside, and then you got an officer on the outside. It almost falls back to Kimball's writings when he talked about the truck boss was the combat engineer. So instead of having people run helter skelter when they get there, just because you got a line going in and you got a working fire and it's a legitimate fire, no, stop. Let's take hold of what we got here, see what's going on, see what's committed already, and how that initial line's going. Again, radios and so forth, they all need to be on to the same frequency, the same channel, or whatever it is your departments employ, and listen to what's going on. And then that boss of that second unit can go and take a look down the alleyway, the driveway, or go to the back, or whatever it is they want to do to get another view. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's surprisingly simple and not complicated, but the waters have been muddied thoroughly by some of these different concepts where people take a command approach from, say, a larger entity, or maybe a place from a completely different region of the country, and they try to make it fit where they're at versus what they're dealing with, the resources they have, the geography, the locality, the type of companies and people that are showing up. I mean, you say it all the time, firefighting is circumstantial and local, and ICS is no different. It should match the way with what you're messing with, what you're playing with.
Right.
It should, that's what you should build on. Jerry, can you weigh in on here a little bit from maybe the volunteer standpoint and talk a little bit about how that ICS is taken on their bread and butters?
Sure. I don't think it's a whole lot different. We're showing up with limited manpower now, to get days of all the seats on the rig filled or gone with us. And I think the command and control starts long before the tones come in. Yep. The leadership has to set the tone for that department. And we're so diverted by hazmat, EMS, and all this other stuff. You pull up, like Jeff was saying, and you got a fire. Everybody's got to know, getting a line in position, getting water on a fire. That's what we're here for. Pretty much everything else is secondary, and extinguishing that fire, especially if we're talking about a residential fire, controlling and extinguishing that fire probably is going to do more for the overall operation than anything else you can think of. So, I think it starts ahead of time. I also think, though, real quick, we talk about two different things. You pull up to a raging industrial fire, maybe the officer shouldn't be inside with the nozzle.
Right.
Maybe that's the time he's supposed to stay outside. So, like Jeff said, circumstantial, and we all want this golden bullet, or silver bullet that's gonna, I do this all the time. Well, you can't do it all the time. You gotta use your head a little,
Yeah.
Makes sense. Apply what you have to the scene you're working. I mean, it seems simple, but we hear a lot about it. there's an entire industry that's grown up around the fire service, selling ICS. It's been going on for decades now. But there already is a national standard. There already is common language out there. We're just choosing not to use it, and we're buying whatever somebody might be selling. And oddly enough, some of those things actually expire, and you have to recertify, almost like you forget what you were taught, so you need to recertify. So that's interesting. I wish people would look at that on its face and say, you know what, what are we actually getting here? You know, but I don't want to get off on a sidebar there. Chad, Micah, you guys want to add a little bit on this bread and butter operation here?
So Jerry really took kind of what I was going to say, that your command starts way before you get to that fire. If you know, I ride a 3-man company, so a driver's staying outside and I have one guy. It's not hard to watch him, but I have other things I'm thinking about, because, you know, I'm in charge until somebody else gets there, and until my chief gets there. But you have to, you know, if you've taught him well, and I mean, it's nerve-wracking when you get a new crew and you're a new officer. But if you've gone over things and he has the basics, we make this job way harder than it has to be. The basics always work. You know, if you're good with hose, you're good with nozzles, you're good with SCBA and your ladders and your forcible entry, you've about got the first 10 minutes of the fire knocked. And, you know, that's where I don't have to tell him what to do. He should know what to do. And I'm just following along, and I'm watching so I can watch and make sure that he's okay, and seeing if I'm missing anything that could get us. And, you know, from one of those departments that uses I have to recertify every 4 years, you know, you can't let it dictate your strategies. You know, it's just the way I look at it. It's a communication model.
Good point.
It's
Good point. Don't let it dictate your strategy.
Because I went through the class, and I know we all know what we're talking about. I don't have basements in Texas. And to get my cert, I put out a lot of basement fires on the computer. So, you know, it's geographical. We don't have them down here. But, you know, I do believe, like Shupe said, your officer's job is to be right behind. The engine officer's job is to be right behind the nozzleman. You don't need to be talking on the radio. You need to be right behind, because 9 times out of 10 in our departments down here, those are the least experienced guys on the nozzle. You don't know how many fires they've had. They may not have ever seen something like you're going into before. So it's your job to be right there with them and make sure everything goes well.
That's right. Yep. Okay.
All right, this is rounding out the bread and butter stuff. So single line fire, smaller occupancy. I think we got a good idea where our heads are on this. Let's go up a notch or two here. Let's talk about maybe a multiple line fire. Jeff, you mentioned like a 6-unit apartment building. That could be a multiple alarm fire in many communities, right? It's talking 8,000 square feet total, and maybe you got fire on a couple different floors through the structure. Could have multiple companies operating on different levels of the building. Now this turns into more of a strategy type scenario, where we're not just sending a single line in to put the problem out. We may have multiple lines. So where do we start keeping track of this?
Well, as Chad says, and Jerry both, you know, your command structure starts well before the alarm ever comes in. If you're a career operation, that's what company officers are supposed to be responsible for, their company, and be in charge of them. If you're a volunteer organization and you have people coming from all over, well, who has the rank? Who's the ranking officer when you're responding and at the scene? So all this stuff needs to be choreographed ahead of time about, you know, how command is supposed to be structured. So that right there. This is something we covered before. And I'm glad we're talking about it again tonight because it needs revision. It needs to be looked at again. And that is because of where we just come from and the scenarios that we ran down in Waco when we were down there a couple of weeks ago. You get and these 3-story buildings, they're the norm now. It's fun because to go out there, and work with the department. But when they tell you, hey, what we got now? We got fire resistive on the first floor, and they're going to put parking underneath. Then they're going to have 4 stories of wood frame built on top of it. You get a fire in one of those places that's running through the void spaces on different floors. Yes, you need lines on each floor. You need truck on the roof. You have to have an officer on each one of those lines. Or if you don't have an officer, an acting officer. Or if you don't have an acting officer, you have a senior firefighter to be responsible for that hose line. How many times have we seen or heard the stories? Well, we put the fire out and everybody just stood around. And you know what it was doing? It was roaring in the ceiling overhead. You put down the contents fire, but you had nobody to take charge and say, hey, truck, we need you to pull the ceilings now. We need you to open up the walls. Hey, we need a line on the floor above. Hey, let's have communication with those guys up there. You follow what I'm getting at? And see, that's the job of the engine company officer. And that's why that person should be right there around that nozzle. So when knockdown is taken, or all visible fire is knocked down, or whatever the case may be, you need someone to take charge of the overhaul, which starts right there. And if there's extension going up that they see it, get on that radio and let everybody know. So
Yeah, I would say that this is where accountability really is. It's a personal thing and not a personnel thing. You gotta be personally responsible, and then you have to also know who you're working with. Have it, not just a company. Like, you need to know which engine or truck company is that's assigned to you, and literally keep track of them. Make it personal.
Yeah, one point I want to make too, and then I'll turn it over to you guys. Let's say we have, once again, 3 or 4 story. Where do you want to put the fire? Second floor? Let's put it on the second floor. And you've got a gabled truss or wood frame roof on top. So it's a 4-story wood frame, fire in the second floor, line going into that suite or that apartment, goes down the hallway into the bedroom, son of a gun, because it started, let's just say it started in the bedroom. Now it, got past the ceiling, got past the drywall, and it's in the wood framing of the structure right now. That officer cannot stand right there the whole time and watch what goes on. Remember, he all of a sudden becomes that what do you want to call it, the floor officer or whatever, or that suite. You got to move around and get on the other side of the walls and take a gander, say, hey, we get any hot spots developing here? Get that person with a hook to pull the ceiling and expose that. Because if you knock the fire down and stand in one spot, that fire may be already extended over at another suite horizontally. You follow what I'm getting at? So by the time it shows itself, it's already 1 or 2 floors above you, and it's heading for the cock loft or that attic space. So, okay.
Yeah.
And Jeff, I think that's the team concept that you always talk about, that nozzleman is working the immediate fire area, and the officer should be thinking, beyond the next step. So the nozzleman knows he's got the officer kind of looking out for him, looking at the big picture.
Right.
The officer knows the fireman is duking it out with the fire as best he can. And that's that team effort. I think it's perfect, the way you described it.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Hey, boss, I wish that the apartment buildings were only 3 stories now down here. They're 5 is usually the minimum now.
Oh,
and, y'all both everybody saw them when y'all were down here. And, you and I drove, and Diederich and I drove through Dallas, Fort Worth area. And, the apartments are really small once they get in there. So if it's a content fire that got into the wall, it's really easy to get that out, usually pretty quick. As a matter of fact, that's our best bet on making this incident work, is knocking it down real quick. But then, the important thing to remember is, as soon as that nozzle goes down, y'all always tell you, what do we say? Nozzles down, hooks up. So you got to get, those apartments are so small. I can move 20 feet and I'm in a different apartment. I just walk out. I still can hear my guy. I can talk to my guy. Once he has the fire knocked down, I need to be next door if somebody's not already there to make sure it didn't go into that room.
Give us an idea, square footage, what you're seeing.
So some of our efficiency apartments are going to be 800 square feet.
Okay. So can you have 2 bedrooms, maybe 2 bathrooms?
Usually those are 1 bedroom, 1 bath.
Okay.
And it's kind of a one giant area and there's no walls. So those are really easy. A 1,100 square foot, 1,200 square foot apartment, that's going to be your 2 bedrooms and a kitchen and a living room area. So they'll have they'll have 2 bathrooms. But even then, we're not talking huge apartments.
No, but again, it's what's behind the drywall.
Yes, what's behind the drywall? Did it get into the other apartment? Did it get above me? And then, usually wherever there's water, if the sprinkler popped, whatever apartment that is, you can bet you're going to have water damage all the way down to the ground, right underneath it. So,
Jeffrey?
Yeah. All right. So with that, I'm wondering, especially in Chad's scenario, you got this multiple floor building and you got companies working on top and underneath. And let's talk about those, the inside truck guys doing search, the squad company guys that are, essentially our wide receivers of the fire service. I mean, they're running all over the place. No one's really has an idea where they're at from moment to moment. But they're doing an important job. I mean, they're getting deep and fast into the building and making the look and the search. And how do we keep track of them? How do we manage this scenario with those jobs going on?
Jeff, Diederich, I love how he's used a football analogy. We call them the gunners. The truckies, the gunners, the scout, they're the ones that just go full thread into the buildings and looking for the fire, searching for life. And it's just funny you mentioned that because we call them gunners, and they're usually the most senior people that we know on the job, who have time on the job, experience. But you're right. Sometimes we're like, where did they go? Where'd they go? And then they come back, they come to you through the smoke and through the thin and thick, and they say, hey, the fire's over here. Come upstairs. It's to the room on the right, to the left, and bad boom, bad bing. So sometimes this is a great highlight. What we're talking about is the important communication with the truck crews and the engine bosses. As we've always said, those truck company bosses, they're the combat firefighters who really help coordinate where the search of the fire is at and how we extinguish it. And then the command person outside, they have to have that faith and trust and know that we're doing our job safely and efficiently, but being aggressive, doing our job without being scared by the tactics and by SOGs and policies. So just throwing that one there.
Yeah, I would.
Yeah, go
Sorry, Shupe, the last thing I was just going to add is, as engine companies, I think it's super important that we stay where we're assigned. If we're assigned to, whether it's the suite or the floor or the area, we need to stay honest with that and not just keep chasing either like that truckie that's saying, hey, it's right upstairs over here. We need to make sure that we are taking care of the area that we're assigned to, so that command knows if something goes bang, where at least those organized companies are that can do the actual firefighting. Let's not forget who's got the water with them.
And that's also important for company concept also. That the engine officer or acting officer, we keep saying that, doesn't let the crew roam or fall apart. You got to keep them together. And if you're an engine officer and you get like a truck, like where I'm from, the trucks assign one guy to go with the attack line. When that guy steps off the truck at the scene of the fire, he follows a line in and does the truck work or the opening up or the forcible entry for the attack line. So that engine boss really has got an accountability issue. You You got your guy on the nozzle, and if you're fortunate enough to have another fireman on the hose line, that's great. But then you get that truck guy, by SOP, that guy's supposed to be there with that attack nozzle. So Jerry, I think you were bringing it up, or one of you guys brought it up about, well, how do we start organizing the fire ground? Regardless of the size of the fire department, you have to have a plan to go out with. And I'll tell you another thing too about, smaller fire departments, smaller fire departments that run mutual aid or automatic aid. I don't know how many guys they got on duty, but sometimes you see 2 people and so forth. But the point is that, if you're going mutual aid or automatic aid and you can, well, then you should send at least 3 people on that engine. And that everybody's got a job. So whether your department is helping this department or that department or a third department down the road or whatever, that you have a smooth flowing operation. So let's say, Jeff, you're Bedford and you're going out by Jerry and your engine is second or third due or whatever, and your pump operator, he just doesn't go with you. He knows that his job is to make sure water supply is taken care of, regardless of what fire department you're from or what fire department you're helping. So it's like following the basic steps of fire attack for your engines is that if we got a line going into a building, then we got to get the water supply established. Well, who's there to get it done? And that's what position assignments are for. So
Yeah, it makes perfect sense, and that's exactly how we do it when we roll out into an automatic aid scenario. Our driver is to conspire with the original engine that's on the scene and make sure that they have the water supply they need.
Jared,
And the rest of us break off into assignments.
Yeah, I think Jeff hit it. You got to have that plan ahead of time. You can always adjust off of that plan, but if that driver doesn't know what he's supposed to be doing, and the bosses don't know what he's supposed to be doing, it's chaos. For example, the guy can maybe he's gonna, I don't know, whatever he thinks is right that day with no bad intent, but it wasn't kind of according to the plan that everybody thinks they've got.
right.
The other thing I think about command and control is important is we talk a lot about being inside, and that's where everybody wants to be. The outside chief maybe can see conditions that the inside guys can't. So I know we've all been in this situation, the outside chief pulls you out and it's like, just give us 5 more minutes, we could get it. And maybe you could, but maybe the building was falling down around you and you didn't see that,
Yep.
So
Yep.
Circumstantial, and have a plan and being able to adjust off of that plan based on the circumstances,
Yeah.
I think is the key. Like everybody said, it's Chad was saying, any rocket science, if we do basic things right, generally goes pretty good.
Right, exactly.
I think the problem is that we overlook the basics and we try to make an advanced class so we can feel better about ourselves, but there is no advanced.
Right.
It's basic. Like we say at every class, we'll love to offer you the advanced class. We don't teach anything different. We just charge more. So
We can't
Give you
even
more
do that.
practice.
and you get a certificate suitable for framing.
There you go.
But yeah, it's just all basics.
It's whatever your department has taught you along the way, whatever your department's history has given you along the way. That's what firefighting is to you and your department. Go to another department, it might be a totally different operation altogether, but that's not advanced to them. So when a guy says, yeah, I want an advanced class, I want to find yeah, you're right. There's nothing advanced about engine work.
We found on the volunteer side, if we said we were going to do a basic class, everybody's like, I got all the basics. So we changed the word to critical. These are, and I think Chad's right. They're basic skills, but they're critical skills. Like we've all said, if we don't do them right, things don't go really well and guys get hurt and buildings burn down and humming. But they're critical skills. I think we downplay it a little bit sometimes too much, that just like Micah was talking about a football team. If you don't do block right, you could say that's a basic skill, but it's a critical skill because the block doesn't go right. The running back's not getting through the hole because there's not one there. So yeah, maybe it's semantics, but
You know what? It really apply. I hate to admit this for Micah, but it does apply to football. I mean, I just coached my son's fourth grade team, and it was all about the basics. And guys,
Yeah.
you have to do it over and over and over again. And there's always a way to tweak it to where you get better as you're doing it.
Yeah, with that, you could say that the basics of getting the first line in place. You have a fireman at the turn, working the hose, advancing the hose line for the nozzle team to make their way in. If the second line is called to come in through the same doorway, it seems like a basic skill, but yeah, wave those guys past you and work the turn for them too. You're standing there, lighten up the line so that second crew can get through and get to their objective. There's no reason for stacking up multiple people at an obstacle if there is already a firefighter there to do it. Plus, it keeps you honest and keeps you where you were assigned. Very basic concept, but you can see where some people will get sucked into doing something else or moving into a different area and abandoning that post. And I think, Micah, you mentioned that the experienced senior people move across the floor and they go from engine to truck and squad work. I think part of that is that experience is knowing that there's a disciplined engine company culture there, and they can trust the engines to stay where they're assigned and actually, and follow through and get that objective met so that they can get a little bit further on, knowing that refuge is only 6-10 feet behind them. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And it goes back, we're just repeating ourselves. It goes back to that team concept. When I show up on scene, and I know the crews that are showing up on scene with me, I either know I have the A team, the hard workers, or I'm on scene with some other companies that, hey, these guys aren't so experienced. The disciplines still have to remain the same. Truck work does truck work, engine company does engine company work. What I'm getting at is there are certain times and circumstances where this truck company, these guys, they're going to help us sniff this fire out. When it's smoke charred down to the floor, you can't see in front of your face. I know that we're going to have huge help with some of the experienced truckies to gunner that fire out. And I want to emphasize how basic, but how vital disciplined truck and disciplined pumpers are. we convolute in the fire service by breaking it down and trying to have quint companies and break this crew up and do that and just really F up the whole fire grounds when it could be so simple.
Okay. Okay. So now we're out of bread and butter operations. And this is one of the things we discussed down in Texas also 2 weeks ago. And that is, if you have a fire that requires extra personnel on the line to help with it, control it, provide relief on it, whatever the case may be, you've got to marry engines together. And it was like, yeah, that's the term. If you want to apply it, I don't care what you call it, whether you're going to put two engines together, marry engines together, or whatever the case is, or whatever you want to call it. If you need two engines, because if you're running three people on an engine, that means you got four people probably to work that line. Am I correct? The two pump operators are going to be working on the supply and guaranteeing that. And then, of course, you have the officer and firefighter from each of those companies to get on that hose line. And everybody knows what needs or should know what needs to be done. As for who's in charge, it should be the first engine officer's fire. And that's as simple as that, It's because it's his line, his person on the nozzle. And so now here comes the second engine, crew, and they support them. It's a very simple thing to follow,
One of the old things that used to help keep companies organized and identified was hose tags. I've watched them go away in my area. We used to each have a tag that we had, and then you could attach them to the outlet of the pumper, and it'd be easy to understand. Well, the crew was assigned to that line. What are some of the other basic little things that have come and gone, or maybe have stood the test of time to help keep us organized? I would argue that's one of them that probably should still be around, and probably has been replaced by Velcro tags on a grease board, which don't do really much of anything. I mean,
Yeah.
rather have just a ride card, but this is
Right.
where we're at.
Well, I think things like the Velcro tags and things like that, the clip-ons, you ever see the guy walk around with all the clips on the back of their helmet, their D-ring? Jesus God, it reminded me of the, well, whatever. So it's like somebody has to come up with an idea. They got to reinvent the wheel, The hose tags were probably around back in the early 1900s. They withstood the test of time. Like when I come on the job, yeah, they were still being used. I think they lasted right into the 80s. And as far as I can see, we should still have them because of what you just said.
Yeah, we rely on technology.
Yeah.
Everybody has a radio, and then that's our safety blanket now. Like, well, I
Right.
got a radio in case I need to let
Well,
somebody know I'm in trouble.
people scream about, we got to have accountability and all that stuff. Well, you had it. That was early accountability. When radios came along, and God, don't ask me when that was, probably in the, I don't know, 50s, maybe. The fire department started seeing radios on apparatus. Maybe before, I don't know. But there's only one person who really had a radio on an engine, and that was the engine officer. So that person, once again, as we said, the engine officer would be inside around the nozzle. And if the chief officer, the battalion, or whoever it was on the scene, needed to talk to what was going on with there, well, that was it, man. That engine officer, had the radio. Now, here we are. Yeah, now everybody's radioactive now,
That's I love it. You said it. Someone's trying to sell something. We got tags. We got passport systems. We got
Oh, yeah.
holy shit.
Yeah, they're not-
Everyone has a radio,
And-
and they're putting like pass things on your SCBA packs to locate you, and then they
Yes.
still want to have you sign in, have another name tag. And dispatch already knows where you're at all the time. What just happened to the command saying, hey, I know my team. I know this team's playing this side. I know this people are playing here. What just happened to the discipline of the command just knowing their damn job instead of having all this other backdoor relying on technology?
Yeah.
And it adds confusion.
Hell, the confusion on the radios. You got Bluetooth from your air pack to so you can talk and they can hear you. Usually I have to tell my 3-seat, hey, turn your radio down to about a halfway to where you can still hear. Because if I'm where I'm supposed to be right near him, I'm going to feed back when it goes out.
800.
So, huh?
800.
Yeah. It's gonna feed back. You're not gonna be able to hear anything.
Right.
Yeah, my former department when I was a captain, I never put my secondary tag on the key rings. And I go, what's the point? They never get taken to command. They get thrown off to the side if command is there because he's not going to look at the damn key rings. I already have my radio and dispatch tracking me. Why are we making it more complicated? Keep it simple.
Well, like I said, somebody
Yeah.
had to have their thumbprint on some kind of system. John, are they still filling out the riding list in Cleveland?
We're supposed to. I do every day.
Okay, and then you got it on the computer and the apparatus too.
Correct. And on the chalkboard and in the journal.
All this
And then the
redundancy.
timesheet.
Yeah, all this redundancy is built in. Son of a gun.
And the last thing, I don't want to steal the show. This
Don't worry, you
goes
won't.
back.
Yeah, that
This
won't
goes-
happen.
Yeah,
This goes back to when the engine company shows up or when the truck company boss shows up. There's always that argument. Well, if you take command, you need to stay outside. And again, it goes back to
No.
your local, what do you have of resources? But here at KCK, we have 25 extra people showing up within 4 minutes. There's a gentleman that's getting paid $100,000 to do command. He's going to be there within 35 seconds. So why are you hamstringing some of the bosses from doing their jobs by just going in and taking care of the problem?
Well, I think when we lost, I shouldn't say the fire service, but a lot of places gave up on company concept or assigning position seats on trucks. You know, that's a, my God, when you mention that to some departments, they've never heard of that before, even to this day. I think without those two things right there, company concept or position assignments on certain types of apparatus, squads or trucks, you've got people who are so afraid. They've been told, yeah, you got to watch out for this, you got to watch out for that. You can't let anybody do anything. You got to hold control over all this before anything gets done. You got to do this, run around the building or stuff like that, because that was the old thing. And I'm not going back that far, my God, back in the 80s and before, where those chiefs in that battalion, if you're a career operation, they were supposed to know who was working that day in every fire department, every engine or every ladder company. And some of those guys, they were very good at that, because you'd go to a fire with them and they knew who was on the companies and so forth. And the engines were supposed to be doing their job, and the trucks and the squads were doing their jobs and things like that. How did we get away from that? How do we muddy up the waters? So anyways, I hope we're not getting off the track tonight here, about organization of the firearm. Maybe we're just, doing a great job of making people aware of it and what to look for and how to, employ organization in the fireground. Let engines do this and the other companies. Well, I don't know. Help me out here, guys.
Hey, boss, one of the things I was going to say is from our class, and I think everybody will agree, and you do a really good job of it. At the end of the day, we do this big scenario and we get 30 firefighters involved in one building, and we use all of them, and we don't have radios. How does that happen?
Yeah, you're right. It's testimony as to slowing down the pace. It's like when Bob Presser and I used to do the senior man show, and we'd always tell people, because they'd always come up about running on a fire ground. No, you don't run. Okay. Walk with a sense of purpose, but don't self-deploy either. And that's one of the things we do in our scenarios. We make sure that we have, like, for example, the first engine in our scenario, it has its jobs to do. I say jobs because we have them doing several things, those three people. We have them doing their jobs and getting them done before we say the second engine crew gets on the scene and we deploy them. They get done, and that's when we say the third engine is now arriving in the scene. And they come over, because I'll go around, I'll say, give me my third engine. Okay, who's my third engine? And they come up, and the only thing we're missing is really a building on fire and a street filled with smoke and debris. But yeah, you're right. We can employ 30 people and have accountability established. And the other thing is we give them the ground rules going in. Okay. So when a crew comes up, let's say, for example, Jeff or John, I sent you guys a crew after you already had a line up there and a crew operating down in Waco. Once a crew goes in and you're there for relief, in a real fire ground, those guys should be going out, not milling around the area. That's accountability. Oh yeah, we're gonna get out. Okay, we're getting relieved. Well, then that company officer on that engine, take those guys and get them out there and go report back to the incident commander. That way, accountability is established that way, and that's the way it should be. And these guys the other day, yeah, they saw 30 people involved in that scenario, and everyone was accounted for and so forth. And it's very simple. If you follow those simple basic steps, slow the pace down. And another comment that we got while we were there was that when you had us come up to you and to wait for our order, we got to see everything falling into place before we were given our assignment. Yeah. Yep. And mind you, we were only doing the work of engine operation. We didn't have a ladder company or squad companies or guys running around doing that stuff. Okay. But that's what it takes. Something like that. Slow it down. Let's take a look at what's going on, the fire building, where companies are committed and things like that. So, all right. I gotta shut up.
That's great. And we just can't hit the point hard enough, I think, is if as the engine companies are given an assignment, that's what's driving the incident. That's what's going to drive the pace. If those engine companies that are assigned to do something, if they can get to their objective and then make a difference, it dictates what you do next. So if you're making assignments on an assumption that they're going to make it and then they don't, now you're 3 decisions behind, because you got to account for the engine, the truck, or the squad that's out there with the assumption that the objective was being met. And we have to rein everybody back in and then redeploy to a different strategy. So, taking it one step at a time is really where you're going to find some success, I would think.
I think what makes the scenarios work so good and so smooth is crew integrity. Those crews stay together, and when we do the scenarios, you go, you 3 are engine 1, you 4 are engine 2, and they stay together. There's not this freelancer running around, and people know where the bosses know where their crews are.
Jer, hey, I don't know if I should bring it up, but I know you were at that fire, that very serious fire in that old joint earlier this year.
Yep.
And I know we talked about that, and that's where you need crew integrity. Okay. A company concept, a boss on every hose line, especially in a condition like that. And of course, the trucks to do truck work. My God, you got fire running through a building, And even though we're not about trucks, we do believe, and that's what I always tell people, like when we're doing our hour-long 25 operating tips for engine, we believe that the success of the engine can be mainly, or I shouldn't say mainly, but can be due to truck work.
Yeah, the fire that Jeff's talking about was a line of duty death, and there was a chain of events that didn't happen. The command and control wasn't there. There was lack of water on the fire. It was a massive old wooden building. The first guys on the scene did a tremendous job. They got literally 100 people out of the building. But all the basic things we talked about, all the critical things we've talked about so far, several of them weren't in place at that fire, and the outcome was horrible. I'm not saying it's anybody's fault, but if you don't have these critical pieces in place, it goes to hell in a handbasket, and it's not good for us. So,
and fortunately or unfortunately, I think whenever we're reading one of those either close calls or line of duty death, it's communication and command and control is like the 2 automatics, 1 and 2 on every single report. And I think that kind of waters it down a little bit. Whereas, if they can get into more of the specifics, because when some people hear communication, like, oh, well, they didn't have radios, or
we need more radios.
Command and control, like, oh, there wasn't an incident commander there within a reasonable first few minutes, or was the commander not certified? I mean, what is the command and control situation? So it's always number 1 and 2, and I don't think that it gets I don't think it gets the due that it should by constantly listing that as the problems. Like you mentioned, poor tactics dictate different strategies.
Yeah, the NIAS reports are great, but they don't get specific enough. Just to throw that general lump out there, Jeff, I agree with you. I got to consult with them on one of the reports, and that was the recommendation I made to them, that you just can't say these generalizations. It's like, because guys read them and go, yeah, no kidding. Well, what was the specifics of command and control that weren't there, or communication? you know, like you said, Jeff,
Communications is gonna be on all of them.
I tell you,
yeah, but it could be interpreted as, did the radios not work? Did we need more radios? Or did somebody not say something to somebody else, which is real communication, or
Yeah.
was it misinterpreted or whatever? You know what I'm saying?
well, this is interesting because, you know, that's one of the things. And by the way, none of this stuff that we're talking about is new. Because I remember, like I
Mhm.
said, you know, when we were seeing Incident Command come out to the American Fire Service after it had been worked into those programs like the old PIC, SIR, and ICS classes, one of those things was terminology.
Mhm.
So when you have, like in your case, how many volunteer departments you got, Jer?
There's
In
20,
that route?
26 in our county.
26.
Mhm.
So you think by this time, after all the years that stuff has been out there, that they would have like a terminology booklet. And it doesn't have to be a booklet. I'm not talking something like that. I'm talking about, you know, just a few pages that you standardize the terminology for all departments countywide
Mhm.
or construction terms, things
Mhm.
like that.
Yeah.
You know?
We got some departments use 1, 2, and 3 for sides of buildings. Some are using A, B, C.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
You know what? You really touched the nerve, Jeff. I think we're seeing in the fire service, especially in the volunteer side, a huge lack of leadership. And I'll give you an example. Our dispatch center just went to some sexy dispatch protocol, and now they dispatch us to a structure fire. Okay, is a structure fire blowing out the windows, or is it smoke in the building from an electric motor that, you know, isn't a big deal?
How do you know?
That you don't know. So you're trying to, you know, put the plan together and think about, well, I know where this building is, I know where the hydrants are. You know, you're trying to put that all together, and the incident commanders can't because they're going to a structure fire that they have no clue what it is. You know, is a fire blowing out the window, or is it a little bit of light smoke from electric motor and HVAC system? You know,
Yeah.
Yeah, we,
but
we get the same thing, Jerry. We're sending multiple companies to, you know, fire in a stove. You know, and it's, you know, years ago, this was a single company operation.
Yep,
You know,
yep.
you get there, isolate it, maybe even carry the stove out of the kitchen, and
Yep, yep.
you're done. And again, it has, you know, taken some of the impetus out of the willingness to be going mutual aid or automatic aid.
Mhm.
When you keep constantly ringing the bell for what for years was just a single company operation.
We're bringing sometimes as many as 6 departments to a 2-room residential fire. And Jeff, just like you said, that was a one-line fire. What the hell are these 5 other companies doing here? You know, and literally they're not doing anything because the fire's out by the time they get there. So I don't know.
Yeah, one good positive thing that we've evolved from is when we were hard in the paint with having a RIT company. So we had the, you know, 3-4 ninjas with tools standing there ready to go.
Mhm.
That's changed over the years, and now we have what we call more or less on deck. So we might have one company who's just not committed to being inside. They might be
Mhm.
pulling utilities or, you know, something like that, but they're not completely engaged to where if they needed to get into something, they could.
Mhm.
And then, you know, they're just, when you rotate out, when your company rotates out, you go on deck, and then, you know, the other company goes and fills in. So
Mhm.
that seems to be a better option, I think, than just,
Yeah.
you know, assigning the truck to be RIT. You know, nobody likes being on that. No, and after a while, nobody's taking it seriously. They're just, you know, standing around, may or may not be paying attention, may or may not be ready to go. And statistically, we know that the best RIT company are the companies that are working in the area of the problem already. So, yeah,
Isn't that crazy? That now that's what they're realizing after all these years of having to pull 1,000 people into this one-room fire because it might get away.
Yeah.
People have become so fearful of, you know, of their jobs. Is it because they don't know?
Jeff, can you move your mic? There you
How
go.
am I sounding now?
Yeah, that's
Oh,
not-
way better.
Okay.
You know, on that topic, teaching the fireground survival, exactly to your point, only 7% of maydays are saved by
Mhm.
the RIT team. The other 93 are by them from themselves or a adjacent crew or something like that. So
Yeah.
very few are being saved by that RIT team.
And I think that's a leadership issue too. You know, John, that's a great point, but the leaders aren't delving into that data and seeing how best to apply their resources on the fire ground because they haven't done their homework. I just, and I don't want to be picking on incident commanders. I mean, we do a good job at what we do, but we sometimes, are too focused like this to, and there's a balance, you don't want to be out in space all the time either, but, I don't know. It just,
Nap, is that, and this isn't the topic for tonight, but what you just described, is that more of a LEPC or emergency management conflict, or are they trying to get their ISO rating by having so many firefighters on scene?
yeah, I don't think so, Micah. I think it's just it's a leadership issue on our side that, I don't know, maybe they're just not experienced enough. Again, like Jeff was saying, you stretch a line in, you knock a couple of rooms down, pretty good shape, but I don't know. It's
Yeah, because you got all these crews showing up on a doghouse that's on fire in the backyard.
Yeah.
And then the Miss Smith's house is on fire across the district, and then, oh shit, where's everybody at?
Mhm.
You dispatched 40 people to a doghouse fire.
Yeah.
I could
So
switch us gears to one other scenario, and that would be more the mid-rise or higher up apartment fire scenario, where the incident commander may or may not be in the lobby or out in the street in front of the building, and then who is typically supposed to be that forward officer, the one that's taking in information and making decisions up there, and then keeping command, I guess, aware of how the firefight is going. This is kind of runs counterintuitive to like our bread and butter, where we got an incident commander who's mobile and getting around and peeking their head in here and there. But when you're in a situation where you can't do that just because of the locality, the actual physical size of the building, how are we handling that? How are we trusting and communicating with our forward officer who's making the operational decisions, really?
John, you were smiling over that.
No.
Oh, I thought you were.
He's
Wait,
just
wait.
typically
No.
happy. Yeah.
Okay. You're thinking
Something
about
he
jelly
said, but-
beans. Okay. All right.
Probably.
First of all, you again, firefighting is circumstantial and it's local, and it's also geographical also, but we're for now it's circumstantial and local. So let's take your area, Jeff. And how many people are going to respond to that standpipe operation up on the 9th or 10th floor? How long is it going to take them to get there? Who do you have arriving on the first apparatus? What is your SOP for for example, if you get a call of smoke on the 10th floor, first engine gets there, you got 3 people on the engine, you're the boss on it, okay? And your truck comes in with 2 people. And then of course, somebody's got to drive the dock in the box, unit. So what do we do? How do we handle that? Do we go investigate? And who goes investigates? Well, that should be an officer with that crew to go investigate. That's your forward officer right there, right off the bat.
Yeah.
And if it's a working fire, well, then that's got to be communicated down to your pump operator out in the street. And again, now all these other units coming in need to be a part of that organization as if you were one department. So we went through this when I was on the job. Who should go investigate and what should be the complement of personnel? Is it one engine, one ladder? Because we looked at SOPs from departments all over the country of similar operations, and it was like, holy cow, it was just like hard to match up. And then, of course, you have the hard-headed officers who are going to say, well, I don't want anybody standing around waiting for the truck to get there. I want that first crew to get up there and see what's going on. Well, you know, now you're talking about personalities getting involved, you know? And so how do you, but the thing is, you got to have an officer up there, you know?
Yeah, that is the big issue with us, is being a smaller department and surrounded by other small departments without a chief officer on duty 24 hours a day, where after hours they would be arriving, taking command.
Can't be a
it's left
chief
the
officer.
company-
Yeah.
Excuse me, it's left the company officers to figure this out. And it really is, it becomes dependent on who's working that night and how are they going to handle it. We do have a set plan. We have a general idea how we're going to handle it, but who's out on squad calls? You know, whose truck is out of service that night? You know, who's getting there? So
Right.
For us, our first arriving units are going up and investigating because we just don't know who else is coming right off the rip. So
And so here again, let's take a look at some of the other small pieces of your standpipe operation SOP. So are you practicing 7 up or 5 and below?
it's not written, but it's understood. You know,
See?
we're walking up.
Yeah. So by the time the crew gets up there, they're going to be gassed. You know? And you want that standpipe kit with you, because if you get up there and son of a gun, it is a working fire, well, then you don't want to radio back down and wait for the next crew to come up there and do the same thing you just did. You might as well take it with you up there, because that's what they always say about standpipe operations. They're labor intensive. So that's the key of getting things started early on.
Yeah.
It's not a fun situation, especially like in departments like in your case. You're under gun going in.
Yeah, and for us, the solution is just our neighboring departments. We have to have a good relationship with them. We have to know them, and we have to understand that when that incident happens, we do have to marry companies, and it may be 2 or 3 of my guys working under the supervision of the neighboring community, right? Just because if somebody from my hometown is the in-charge officer and making decisions, you know, those firefighters need to be accountable to somebody. You know, we need to make sure that we have accountability. They need to be assigned with somebody in charge.
Yeah.
So just wanted to try and feel out and see like how some of your guys would handle your situation, knowing that KCK, Cleveland, you guys, larger operations and these things are already figured out. But Chad has an automatic aid system going, even though he's got, you know, a bigger department but he's working hand in hand with some other locales, and Jerry's with the multiple volunteer services. So having a forward officer, is it something that's formally written, or is it something kind of taken case by case?
So like on high rises, since we're talking about high rises, because we have several over 10 stories, over 15 stories. First of all, I never want to take the elevator, because in my own district, I know how many elevator rescues I make, because those things are always breaking down, let alone what are they going to do when they have a fire going and a sprinkler flowing and water going into the elevator. So I don't trust them for anything. I mean, they don't get maintained that well. I mean, I talked to you the other day, Shupe, how many people had we pulled out of elevator? I'd done 3 elevator rescues that day. And, you know, it's easy. You take the key, open it up, but you have to be on the outside to be able to open it up.
Yeah. Fill the shaft with smoke or hot water.
Yep.
And that's a different story.
So Jeff, what we do, and then to go back, when I was at the other station and I responded with the truck, we'd go into the building at the same time. You know, we'd go check the panel. The truck would go up and the engine would stay down. That way, you know, if there was a fire and they found it, hey, you're going to use this stairway for fire attack. We'll use this stairway for evacuation. That way we weren't walking and gassing ourselves up, making it to the wrong place. Or, hey, we can't get it from this stairway. You need to go to the north stairway.
Yeah.
And And then it puts the truck in a good position to start rescue. You know, hey, they're not going to go into the fire, but they can start. And then, you know, if there's not anybody on that floor, they can go to the floor above, which is where they're supposed to go.
Let me ask you that term you just used. Is it really rescue or is it evacuation?
Evacuation.
Or is it rescue in place?
If it's on the floor, I'd say it'd probably be evacuation. Anything above or 2 floors, it's going to be shelter in place. We need to get somebody up there with them.
I was going to say, because sometimes if you do have a fire, you know, and I'm not talking, you know, whatever, a blowtorch, but let's say you open up that door and that hallway goes like that. You don't bring people out into that hallway, right?
No.
Not if you can. You know, taking a look at the construction of the building, and you got a line there ready to go to work and so forth. You know, it's like sometimes, see, these are the decisions that you're going to make, and especially having a boss up there, Jeff.
Mhm.
Making those decisions in those early moments when you hit the jackpot, right,
You know,
Mr. Mateer?
That's right.
and so
And then he gives them jelly beans at the end of the fire.
you know, like you're sitting there and, you know, we have 10-story apartment buildings. You would think if people smell and see smoke, they would get out, but they don't. They don't leave. You know, I started in 99, and I remember when 9/11 hit, and we have all these high rises, and I remember before nobody would evacuate. After 9/11, everybody came out if the fire alarm went off.
What was that fire down in the
Huh?
flats, John?
Oh, just this week, yesterday,
Just
or
the other day.
Oh, yeah.
That thing
I
was
saw a
rolling.
video of it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that
it
thing
was.
was rolling, and that was a top floor burning out, and that started a grill on the balcony.
I haven't talked to anyone about that fire yet.
Okay.
So
That thing was roaring, and it was working
Yeah, it
its way
was.
back over the top of the building. You know, rubberized roof. Man,
I
oh,
got
man.
I got the roof membrane
Yeah.
going.
Yeah. So,
Hey, Diederich, but what you were asking about, when would we, if our 9th or 10th floor progressed long enough and we got our 2nd battalion in, a lot of times that 2nd battalion, they'll get assigned, the chief officer, he'll get assigned to that division 9, and he's got primary search, or he's in the stairway or a floor below
yeah.
making the calls for it.
What do you call that guy?
Uh,
What's the title that you give him in a working fire situation like that? Should it be operations officer?
I've heard it called forward command. I've heard it called 9th.
You just brought up a good point that needs to be ironed out. Fires on the 10th floor. He goes and runs the show from the 9th floor. What is he? What's his job, and where is he located?
interior.
Yeah, interior.
There's a lot of guys interior. Okay.
Yeah.
And
Interior
if you got to
command.
shuttle air bottles up and down, you know, all that stuff's going interior. But my point is that, I think we call it what, operations officer by the SOP. The point is that if this guy's on the 9th floor, the floor below, he's not command on that floor. He's not that's not his location. He's actually responsible for what's above him. So anybody, what's going on the 9th floor there? Fire's coming out of the windows of the 10th floor. You follow where I'm going with this?
Right.
To know where everybody's at and what's going on. So whenever those communications are made from the outside to the inside and vice versa.
Yeah, because if you don't have a forward officer or an operations officer, you're going to miss all those face-to-face communications that make or break an incident.
Yeah, we would call that guy the operations officer because he's got operational control over the guys. I call it the doers, the guys that are actually doing stuff. But I think something we've missed talking about too is like this fire you're talking about is you're going to have multiple companies. You've got EMS maybe with victims. You got Red Cross with, trying to get people housed. You got public affairs issues. So we need to have that incident management team coming behind us to help the incident commander at this call, because the IC is busy with the with him and the operations officer, and I call the fire stuff, but all the other stuff's got to get done too. You know, a situation unit leader, maybe, keeping control of the command post for the incident commander, that kind of stuff. So
Yeah.
we have deputy fire coordinators that will come in. We've not done a good job training those guys to fill those roles. So a lot of times the fire coordinator will come up and stand next to the chief's buggy there. You know, he's got the back of his truck open and just go, I'm here to help. Well, great, you're here to help. You know, how about you know what your job is, and we have that molded into the plan, you know. So just again, that I think this high-rise fire we're talking about, or large industrial, commercial, whatever it might be, you know, we got cops who need to block off roads. We got alternate
Yeah.
traffic plans. You got all the shenanigans going on.
Yeah.
So you really need a staff to help, help manage those issues.
Would we agree that going into a building, let's just say it's a standpipe structure, okay, that the initial boss should be going up there with the crew?
Mhm.
I mean,
That's
is that
my
our
instinct.
position? Okay, I mean, you guys can have your opinions on it. I don't care, but for the most part, I'm just trying to get a consensus here.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I
But-
agree. I think that
That would be
boss
my
should be in
instinct.
charge in there.
yeah.
But I
Okay.
think there's a break point. You know, you pull up and there's fire blowing out 10 windows.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, maybe it's more important to not have that boss up there. Maybe it's important to have him.
Absolutely.
You know,
Yeah.
so I
See,
think there's a break point, I think.
you're right. And I agree with that. Absolutely. That's that whole thing about the fires are circumstantial. You've got three people, like if Jeff, he's got the squad out or the medic unit out, and it's him and his crew going in, and there it is up there waiting for him.
Mhm.
It's like, what do? You can't expect these guys to, go after that by themselves. It's going to take a lot of help to get all the equipment up there, get the water supply established, and well, whatever. We can go on and on and on.
I want to give one more
Yes,
thing that I've noticed over the years. We've had a couple of it seems like every 4 or 5 years we'll have a big ass fire that'll take a couple days. And one of the things that I learned from another senior officer was when he was taking a radio message, his first response was not only just keying up the mic, but he would report his location. His initial, when command was asking for, engine 2, he would say, Charlie's side, crew of 3, go ahead. And what it did is it just kept reaffirming. It kept that information flowing immediately back to command. Okay, you are where I assigned you. You already have accountability of your crew. And I thought, man, that's slick. I mean, that's a heads up way to handle it when you're at a big ass multiple alarm fire. Take the initiative to, just by saying, yeah, I'm here, but I'm right where you sent me, and I'm here with the people you sent me here with. So again, it was just an experience-based thing that I saw, and I thought, wow, that really makes sense. And it's not getting adopted across the board, but it's just something that I noticed. And that if I'm in that situation where I'm at a larger alarm fire, I'm going to try and do that. Like, you're calling me. All right, I'm checking in with, this is where I'm at. This is who I'm with. And how does that play in with command and control? I think it helps.
I think you're bringing up a great point. Jerry, you guys, and John, Micah, you guys see progress reports?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we see them all the time.
We never used to do those. Fire would come in, they could go 3, 4, 5 alarms, and those chiefs out there would be running that fire, and that would be it. You'd hear the fire ground radios, but you never had progress reports. And then we finally got into progress reports. It was like, holy cow, how is it that we waited this long to do this stuff? And I'm going way back when we started doing them. Don't get me wrong. It's we've been doing them for some time, but my God, it was like, yeah, fires used to be secretive, So, yeah.
Yeah. And
That's
we
your
can s-
accountability, by the way. Or I shouldn't say It is. It lends to your accountability. Progress report. We have 2 lines in operation. We search, primary search is negative. Roof ventilation accomplished and fire seems to be coming under control. We'll give you a report back in 10 minutes. Something as simple as that to know what you got. So if you got 2 lines in operation and the fire's coming under control, that's a good point right there.
You know, Shupe, you bring up an excellent point because from my formal fire department, we'd only have, you name the size of the fire, anywhere between 20 and 30 guys. Today's fire department at KCK, we have somewhere from between 20 to 60 guys on scene. Long story short, the difference of the 2 departments, Manhattan Fire would talk a lot on the radio. And then KCK, we hardly ever, we still don't talk a lot on the radio. You can turn on, you hear a fire go out, you turn on the radio, you get the basic information that you're wanting to hear. And then this radio silence, like, holy shit, am I on the right channel? But what happened?
Yep. Yeah.
But then at 10 minutes, there's a commander giving a progress report. And it's 1, to let all the other listeners to know. 2 is to let the chiefs to relax a little bit who are listening to the radios. And 3 is so dispatch can document it.
Yes.
But it's funny, night and day difference between 2 fire departments. One talks a lot on the radio, and then our department today, KCK, you're like, am I on the right channel?
Yeah, our department went to basically however long the fire was, talking on the radio for 45 minutes or an hour, whatever it was, which is pretty annoying and pretty inefficient. But hopefully we go back, take a step back from that way. We talk less on the radio. Going back what Jeff was saying earlier about having chiefs knowing what's going on. I mean, just giving simple benchmarks. I mean, the officer really is the one who's going to make the chief's job, or whoever the officer in charge is, a lot better. Hey, search is, all clear on 3rd floor, or whatever the benchmark is that they're making. It's imperative that they do all that stuff to make the chief know what's going on and draw, without crayons or construction paper, Shupe, draw a picture, in his head of what is going on.
How about be closer to the fire and move around the fire ground to see for yourself if you're a chief officer? Gee, how simple could that be?
Yeah.
Oh, you have to get out of your car and the air conditioning, and the warmth in the wintertime. So
I may know somebody who's actually put in timeout as an incident commander by the chief.
put in timeout.
Well, that's what happens when you use bad language.
And the incident commander asked the chief, who's on this basic bread and butter fire, saying, "Chief, are you putting me in timeout?" I think the chiefs just got done watching that command from the windshield videos and was trying to implement that at the time. Well,
Did they have a little stool for that person?
Oh my God.
That they had
I
to
tell
sit
you
on?
what,
I'm laughing at this thing.
hey,
Guy's
how
running
about,
up the board and he's running out of board and he's running out of windshield.
how about you tell a head football coach, hey, coach, you just stay right there. You don't go up and down the sideline. Don't talk to your guys in the huddle. I want you to stay right here in this comfortable box with your headset on, and you lead your men that way.
Yeah, have him go sit with the offensive coordinator up in the box.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I forgot about that story.
That's a good one.
Well, I'm glad we had a chance to hit the subject. It's kind of, it seems distant from engine company operations, but obviously it's vital, especially when we get into the larger incidents. So let's wrap it up here. If you got another small little tidbit or nugget, like to hear it. If not, Micah, John, you guys want to start off with rounding out what we do here?
Yeah, I just want to say, this isn't a promotion exam podcast. However, if you're that incident company officer arriving on the scene, whether you're pumper or truck, don't get freaked out. Remember the basics. Read a John Norman book. Walls Was Hot, and don't rely on your your school board check boxes to do the job.
Let your experience drive you. For sure. Jeff?
Well, I thought you were gonna save me for last to recap everything.
I can do that.
No, well, whatever you want. I think what we've covered tonight is that we made the point that the engine officer or whoever's acting as the engine officer should be right behind or right near the nozzle, especially when they're attacking a fire. And the importance of the person on the engine, that person can still be in charge, but be right there with that nozzle, that person on the nozzle. And really, that's the primary job right there. I think we also made the point about, 3 people arriving and you got an obvious working fire. Water is primary number 1. Okay, get that line stretched. So that would fall back on make your hose load simple. And a 3-member engine can get a hose line in service that quickly also. Because we showed that when we were down in Texas recently, those guys were like, wow. And again, when we put the scenario into play, they were stretching all over the place and so forth, from those static beds that we always use. I guess that's it. Oh yeah, for your standpipe operations, you got to get an officer up there early on in the incident. It's not fun. You got a lot of stuff ahead of you if you have an actual incident up there. So I guess I'll leave it for the rest of you guys to, break down.
Yeah. All right. Chad, Jerry? Chad's
Hope
waving.
everybody has a happy Thanksgiving.
Oh, okay. We're rolling it up.
Jerry, I'm giving all my time over to you.
What Jeff said.
Oh my God.
You couldn't get a better summary than that.
Unbelievable.
Oh,
I was thinking, what would Micah say?
you're so
Micah
kind.
would say what he said.
I just tried to do a summary. That's all. And then
it's
you guys
good.
were shooting holes in me. So
Yeah.
Chad, you're a real rock star, Chad. God bless your soul.
I know what that means.
all right, it's time to get
He's
off.
a drummer.
Right. God bless
right,
your soul.
well.
Isn't that a Southern term? Oh, bless your little heart.
Bless your heart. That's right.
Yeah, we know what that means for real.
One of 20 different things.
No, I know for sure what it means with this one person.
Depends on how it's said.
Yeah.
All right, folks.
When it's-
I'm going to step in here before this goes on way much longer than it should.
Yeah, for sure.
Thanks for tuning in. You can catch us at strategicfiretraining.com. And thank you, Fire Engineering, for hosting us for our, what is this, the 21st show?
Wow.
22nd? Something like that.
Keep up the good work, guys.
21st. Wow.
And that's
All
for
right,
everybody.
folks. We'll see and talk to you at the next one.
Okay.
See you guys.